The smell hits me first. Petrichor mixed with decomposing cedar and something else, something ancient that has no name in my vocabulary. It's 4:23 a.m., and I'm standing in darkness so complete that my headlamp feels like an insult, a tiny defiant flame against an ocean of black. I've been in the Ho rainforest for 6 weeks, documenting traditional plant knowledge with the Ho and Quileute peoples. My research is straightforward. Ethnobotanical survey, oral history collection, mapping sacred plant sites before climate change erases them. Academic, safe, publishable. Then, 3 days ago, everything changed. I was interviewing Joseph Stormcloud, 87 years old, traditional healer, keeper of plant knowledge going back 7 generations. We were discussing Devil's Club harvesting protocols when he stopped mid-sentence, looked at me with eyes that seemed to see through decades of my academic training, and said, "You ask good questions about plants, but you don't ask the right question about why we harvest the way we do." What's the right question? Who taught us? I assumed he meant ancestors, elders, traditional knowledge passed down. I was wrong. Before humans learned from humans, Joseph said slowly, humans learned from the forest, and the forest had teachers who weren't human. He let that sit between us like smoke. There's someone you need to meet, an elder. She's been here longer than my grandfather's grandfather. She knows things about plants that we've forgotten, things we're only now remembering, but more than that, she knows things about us, about what we were, what we became, what we're losing. Joseph, I don't understand. You will. Tomorrow night, be at the trailhead for the Ho River Trail at 4 a.m. Bring nothing electronic, no cameras, no recorders, no phone, just yourself and your willingness to listen. Now I'm here, watching Joseph emerge from the darkness like a memory becoming solid. He's wearing traditional cedar bark clothing, carrying a woven basket, moving with a purpose that makes his age irrelevant. She's agreed to meet you, he says quietly. This is rare, maybe once in a generation. You need to understand. What you're about to witness will change everything you think you know about human history, about consciousness, about our place in the world. Who is she? Joseph starts walking into the forest, his voice drifting back. The grandmother, the last of the first teachers, the one who remembers when we were still learning how to be human. I follow him into the dark. My academic career has been built on meticulous documentation. PhD from Berkeley in cultural anthropology, specialization in ethnobotany and traditional ecological knowledge, 12 years of fieldwork across 4 continents, publications in peer-reviewed journals, tenure-track position at a respected university. I study how indigenous peoples interact with their environment, how traditional knowledge preserves ecological wisdom that Western science is only beginning to understand. My methodology is rigorous. Recorded interviews, photographic documentation, specimen collection, cross-referencing oral traditions with botanical evidence. But Joseph's instruction was clear. No electronics, no documentation, just presence. It feels like professional suicide. How do I write a paper about an interview I can't record? How do I verify information I can't photograph? How do I prove anything that happens tonight? The answer, I'm beginning to realize, is that I won't. And that's the point. We've been walking for 90 minutes. Moving deeper into old-growth sections where the trees are so massive they create their own weather systems. The canopy is so dense that even in daylight, this place exists in perpetual twilight. Sitka spruce and western hemlock rise like cathedral columns, their trunks wider than my studio apartment. The understory is a riot of green. Sword fern, salal, Oregon grape, moss covering everything in layers so thick the ground feels like walking on memory foam. Everything is wet. Everything is alive. Everything is watching. Joseph stops at a grove where 3 ancient cedars form a natural enclosure. The air here feels different, thicker, more attentive. This is teaching ground, Joseph says quietly. For thousands of years, healers have come here to learn. Not from other healers, from the forest itself. The plants? I ask. The plants. And their guardians. He settles onto the ground, gestures for me to do the same. The moss beneath me is soft, welcoming. I can feel moisture seeping through my field pants, but it doesn't feel cold. It feels alive. What I'm about to tell you, Joseph begins, contradicts nothing in your scientific training. It just adds context that science has forgotten. He reaches into his basket and pulls out several plants. Devil's Club, red cedar bark, Oregon grapefruit, salal berries. You've been documenting how we use these, But you haven't asked why these specific plants, in these specific combinations, for these specific conditions. You assume trial and error over centuries. Isn't that how traditional knowledge develops? Sometimes, but not always. Some knowledge was taught, deliberately, by teachers who understood plant chemistry in ways we're only now rediscovering with advanced laboratory equipment. Other tribes, knowledge sharing between groups. Joseph shakes his head. Older than tribes, older than human language as we understand it. When my ancestors first came to this forest, they were newcomers. They didn't know which plants healed, which plants poisoned, which plants could be eaten and which would kill. They learned, but not alone. He holds up the Devil's Club. This plant, its inner bark, treats diabetes, arthritis, respiratory infections, but it's covered in spines that cause intense pain and infection if touched wrong. How did my ancestors learn to harvest it safely? How did they learn which part to use, how to prepare it, what dosages work? Observation? Experimentation? Experimentation kills people. You don't experiment with unknown plants when survival is marginal. You don't risk poisoning your family through trial and error when winter is coming and food is scarce. Then how? You watch someone who already knows. Someone who's been working with these plants longer than humans have existed. Someone who remembers when these forests were different, when the climate was different, when the plants themselves were different. My rational mind rebels, but something deeper, some part of me that existed before universities and peer review, listens. There are beings in this forest, Joseph continues, who have lived here for hundreds of thousands of years, not as separate from the forest, but as part of it. They understand the plants because they've co-evolved with them. They know which mushrooms cure which diseases because they've watched those relationships develop over millennia. You're talking about the forest people, the old ones, the teachers. We have many names for them. Your culture calls them myths, legends, cryptids. We call them relatives, distant relatives, separate relatives, but relatives nonetheless. He arranges the plants in a specific pattern on the ground between us. This combination treats kidney infections, but only when harvested during new moon, only when prepared with cold water extraction, only when the Devil's Club is from trees growing above 2,000 feet elevation. How do we know these specifics? Because we were taught. By someone who understood plant alkaloid concentrations vary with lunar cycles, altitude, and temperature. Joseph, what you're describing would require sophisticated understanding of biochemistry. Yes, it would. And someone had that understanding long before we had words like biochemistry. The forest has grown quieter. The ambient sounds, dripping water, distant bird calls, wind through canopy, have faded to near silence. She's coming, Joseph whispers. Remember, no fear, no aggression, no attempts to capture or contain what you're about to witness. You're being invited into a classroom that existed before your species had language. Show respect. My heart is hammering. Every scientific instinct screams that this is delusion, mythology, wishful thinking. But my body knows better. My body recognizes predator proximity, the primal awareness that something large and intelligent is approaching. The smell intensifies. Musky, herbal, alive, not unpleasant, but powerful, unmistakable. Movement in the shadows. Something large, something careful, something that knows exactly where we are and has chosen to reveal itself. Don't stare directly, Joseph murmurs. It's considered aggressive. Keep your gaze soft, receptive. I lower my eyes slightly, maintaining peripheral awareness, and then she steps into the grove. My brain struggles to process what I'm seeing. Every instinct, every category, every framework I've built over 12 years of academic training fails simultaneously. She's massive, easily 8 feet tall, maybe more, but it's not the size that overwhelms me. It's the presence, the undeniable sense of encountering a consciousness as complex as my own, housed in a form I have no context for understanding. Her body is covered in dark reddish-brown hair, graying significantly around the face, shoulders, and hands. Not fur, hair, similar in texture to human hair, but coarser, more weather-adapted. Her face is simultaneously alien and heartbreakingly familiar. Prominent brow ridge, broad nose, deep-set eyes that are absolutely, unmistakably intelligent. But it's her hands that break something in me. They're like ours. Long fingers with opposable thumbs, calloused palms, nails worn from use. In her left hand she carries a woven basket. Intricate, beautiful, functional. The weaving pattern is sophisticated, showing mathematical precision and aesthetic consideration. She made that, with those hands, with intention and skill and practice. She's not a myth, she's a person. Joseph makes a soft vocalization, not quite words, more like musical tones. The grandmother responds with similar sounds, complex and layered. They're communicating, not in language exactly, but in something that serves the same function, transmitting meaning, negotiating intent, establishing rapport. The grandmother settles onto the ground across from us, moving with surprising grace for her size. She places her basket between us, an offering, a gesture of peace. Inside, plants, dozens of different species, carefully arranged. She makes another vocalization, looking directly at me now. Her eyes are amber brown, flecked with green, absolutely clear. There's no aggression in them, but there's assessment. She's evaluating me the same way I evaluate research subjects, trying to determine intelligence, trustworthiness, capacity for understanding. She knows you study plants, Joseph translates. She's asking if you understand that plants are not resources, they're relationships. My throat is too dry to speak. I nod. The grandmother reaches into her basket and pulls out a familiar plant, red cedar bark. She holds it up, makes a sound, then touches her own chest. She's teaching, Joseph says quietly, the way she taught my ancestors. Watch. The grandmother takes the cedar bark and begins separating fibers with her fingers, deft, practiced movements showing decades of skill. She weaves them quickly into a small cordage, then gestures to a cut on her own arm. Old, mostly healed but still visible. She wraps the cordage around the cut, tight but not constricting. Then she makes a sound of relief, gestures to the binding, and looks at me expectantly. Cedar bark has antimicrobial properties, I say slowly, my voice barely working. The inner bark contains the japlicins, compounds that prevent bacterial growth. Wrapped around wounds, it acts as both bandage and antibiotic. The grandmother makes a sound that could be approval. She reaches back into her basket and pulls out devil's club root. She mimes chewing it, then touches her joints, shoulders, knees, fingers, and makes an expression of pain relief. She's showing you the same thing she showed our ancestors, Joseph says, but she wants you to understand something more. Watch her hands. The grandmother holds up both hands, palms facing us. Then she points to her right hand, touches her heart, and makes a gentle sound. She points to her left hand, touches her head, and makes a different sound, sharper, more analytical. She's making a distinction. I whisper, right hand, heart, emotional knowledge, left hand, head, analytical knowledge. Joseph nods. She's saying that plant medicine requires both. Understanding the chemistry is left hand, necessary but not sufficient. Understanding the relationship, the respect, the reciprocity, that's right hand. Together they create healing. Separated, they create exploitation. The grandmother watches me, waiting to see if I comprehend. And I do. God help me, I do. Western science approaches plants as objects to be analyzed, compounds to be extracted, resources to be exploited. We understand the chemistry, the alkaloids, the terpenes, the phenols, but we've lost the relationship. We've lost the understanding that plants give their medicine freely when approached with respect, and withhold it when approached with greed. She's teaching you what she taught us thousands of years ago, Joseph says. Before we had laboratories or textbooks, she and her people showed ours which plants heal, how to harvest sustainably, how to give back to the forest what we take. They taught us that knowledge without respect is theft, that understanding without relationship is violence. The grandmother makes another complex vocalization, longer this time. Joseph listens intently, his expression growing heavier. She says your people, meaning academic, Western science, are relearning things her people taught mine millennia ago, but you're relearning them slowly, painfully, destroying whole ecosystems in the process of discovering what indigenous peoples already knew. She finds this frustrating, sad, unnecessary. My eyes are burning. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her we lost something crucial. Tell her. Joseph holds up his hand. She knows. She's watched it happen. She's watched humans separate from the forest, forget the teachings, start treating the world as resource rather than relative. She's watched the consequences. Climate change, species extinction, pollution, destruction. The grandmother reaches into her basket one more time and pulls out something that makes my breath stop. A journal. Old, leather-bound, Pages yellowed. Human-made. Human-written. She opens it carefully, turns it to show me. The handwriting is English, dated 1887. It's a botanical survey, detailed and professional. On one page, a pressed plant specimen, Oregon grape. On the facing page, notes about its medicinal properties, uses, harvesting protocols. At the bottom of the page, a single line in different ink, shakier handwriting, shown to me by the forest guardian. She remembers what we've forgotten. May we remember again before it's too late. The grandmother closes the journal, places it back in her basket. Then she looks at me with an expression I can only describe as profound sadness mixed with fragile hope. She's asking, will you remember? Will you teach others to remember? Or will you continue forgetting until there's nothing left to forget? The grandmother gestures for me to come closer. Every nerve in my body screams caution, but I move forward slowly, telegraphing every motion. I'm now less than 2 meters from a being that shouldn't exist, close enough to see details that will haunt me forever. Her face is deeply lined, not with age exactly, but with expression. She's lived a long life, felt deeply, experienced complexity. There are scars visible beneath her hair, old injuries healed imperfectly, a life lived without modern medicine, without safety nets, surviving through knowledge and resilience. But it's her eyes that undo me completely. They hold something I've only seen in the oldest indigenous elders I've interviewed, witnessing the weight of having seen too much, remembered too much, carried too much history in a world that's changing faster than wisdom can adapt. She reaches toward me slowly, telegraphing intent. Her hand, massive, powerful, gentle, touches my forehead, just rests there, warm and solid. And I understand. She's not just teaching me about plants. She's teaching me about consciousness itself. This being, this person, represents an alternative path evolution could have taken. Where humans developed language, technology, civilization, she and her people developed something different. Deep ecological integration, sustained multi-generational knowledge, consciousness that sees self and environment as continuous rather than separate. We conquered nature. They became part of it. We built cities. They remained in forests. We developed writing to preserve knowledge. They developed minds that remember thousands of years of direct experience. Neither path is superior. They're just different. And the tragedy, the profound, crushing tragedy, is that our path is destroying theirs. Not through conflict or competition, but through sheer transformative force. Our cities, our logging, our climate change, our need to document and exploit and control everything we encounter. The grandmother removes her hand from my forehead and makes a long, complex vocalization. It has the cadence of story, of testimony. Joseph translates, his voice thick with emotion. She says when she was young, many human lifetimes ago, there were more of her people. Not many, never many, but enough. Enough to teach, to share knowledge, to maintain the relationship between forest and human. They didn't interfere often, didn't make themselves known, but they watched, they guided. When humans got lost, they helped them find their way. When humans were hungry, they showed them which plants could be eaten. When humans were sick, they demonstrated which plants could heal. The grandmother continues, and Joseph's translation becomes heavier. She says her people had a philosophy. Consciousness is rare, precious, worth protecting regardless of which species carries it. Humans were young, confused, struggling to survive. Her people had already learned how to live in balance with the forest. So they taught. Not because they owed humans anything, but because letting consciousness fail when you have knowledge to share is wrong. Across species, across vast evolutionary distance, the duty remains. Protect awareness wherever it emerges. My face is wet with tears I don't remember starting. But humans changed. Joseph continues translating. They learned so well, became so successful, that they forgot they'd been taught. They started believing they'd figured everything out themselves. Started thinking the forest was theirs to use rather than a relative to live alongside. Her people withdrew, watching from distance as humans spread, multiplied, transformed everything. The grandmother makes a sharp sound. Pain, grief, loss. One by one, her people disappeared, not all at once. Slowly, across centuries. Some were killed by humans who feared them. Some died from human diseases. Some simply left, going deeper into shrinking wilderness until there was nowhere left to go. She doesn't know if any others survive. She's been alone for, she can't count that high in ways I can translate, many decades, maybe a century, the oldest living being I've ever encountered, the last survivor of an entire people, carrying knowledge that spans millennia, with no one left to pass it to. She says she's old now, very old. She hurts, bones, joints, teeth. She moves slowly. She forgets things sometimes, and she's afraid, not of dying. Death is natural, expected, earned. She's afraid of what dies with her. All the plant knowledge, all the ecological wisdom, all the teachings that kept humans and forest in balance. When she dies, it dies. Forever. The grandmother reaches into her basket again and pulls out objects I hadn't noticed before. Seeds. Dozens of different species carefully preserved in cedar bark packets. She arranges them in front of me, touching each one, making soft sounds. Then she gestures to me, to Joseph, to the forest around us. She's kept these safe, Joseph translates. Species that were important, that had special properties, that need protection. She's been planting them in hidden places, trying to ensure they survive. But she's one person, and the forest is vast, and time is running out. The grandmother makes eye contact with me, direct, intense, pleading. She's asking if your people, scientists, researchers, people with laboratories and seed banks and resources, can be trusted. She's asking if there's a way to share what she knows without being captured, studied, turned into a specimen. She's asking if humans have learned enough yet to accept teaching without trying to control the teacher. The question hangs between us like smoke. And I realize this is the revelation Joseph promised. Not just that these beings exist, but that one remains, carrying knowledge we desperately need, willing to share it despite everything my species has done to hers, but terrified, rightfully terrified, that revealing herself fully means losing the last shred of autonomy she has. I don't know, I answer honestly, my voice breaking. I want to say yes. I want to promise that humanity has evolved past exploitation, past the need to capture and control everything we don't understand. But I can't promise that. I can only promise that I personally will never betray this trust, and that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to create a world where beings like you can be known without being destroyed. The grandmother sits back. She looks at Joseph, makes a questioning sound. Joseph nods slowly. She says that's the most honest answer a human has given her in a very long time, and honesty, at least, is a place to start. The grandmother stands, gestures for us to follow. We move deeper into the forest, into sections I couldn't navigate alone even with GPS. This is her home territory, her classroom, the place where she's maintained knowledge for longer than my civilization has existed. We arrive at a clearing I never would have found, perfectly circular, surrounded by ancient trees, carpeted with moss so thick it feels like standing on clouds. Around the perimeter, plants grow in patterns that aren't quite natural. They're arranged, cultivated, maintained. This is her garden, Joseph says quietly, a living library. The grandmother moves among the plants with obvious affection, touching leaves, checking growth, adjusting positions. She's not just collecting plants, she's curating them, maintaining genetic diversity, ensuring rare species survive. I recognize some: Oregon grape, devil's club, false lily of the valley, vanilla leaf. But others are unfamiliar, possibly rare, possibly species science hasn't cataloged. Each one is placed deliberately, growing in optimal conditions, tended with expertise that makes my university greenhouse look like amateur hour. The grandmother stops at a particular plant, small, unremarkable, with delicate white flowers. She makes a complex vocalization, touching it reverently. She says this plant went extinct in the wild 70 years ago. Joseph translates. Logging destroyed its habitat. She saved seeds, kept it alive here, has been propagating it ever since. As far as she knows, these are the last specimens on Earth. My mind races. An extinct species preserved by a single individual, unknown to science. How many others? How much biodiversity has she single-handedly saved while humanity destroyed ecosystems around her? The grandmother continues showing me plants, and Joseph translates their uses. This one treats respiratory infections. This one prevents miscarriage. This one reverses certain poisonings. This one we don't have words for because the condition it treats is rare and our medicine doesn't recognize it. Each plant represents knowledge. Knowledge that exists in only one mind, housed in an aging body with no successors to receive it. How do I help? I ask desperately. How do we preserve this without exposing you? The grandmother settles onto the ground, fatigue evident. She makes a long vocalization, and Joseph's translation comes slowly. She's been thinking about this for decades, watching humanity develop new tools, cameras, computers, genetic databases. She understands that your species is good at preserving information, even if you're bad at preserving relationships. She's wondering if there's a way to share the information without revealing the source. Anonymized data, I say, thinking frantically. I could collect samples, document uses, submit everything as traditional knowledge from indigenous informants. The scientific community accepts that all the time. We wouldn't need to explain where it came from. Joseph translates. The grandmother responds, skeptical. She asks, what prevents your people from tracking the information back to its source? From using technology to find this garden, to find her? It's a valid concern. GPS coordinates, trail cameras, satellite imagery, DNA analysis that could identify unique genetic markers in the plants, leading researchers to this exact location. I'd have to obscure everything, I say. Collect from multiple locations so no pattern emerges. Never mention this specific site. Claim the knowledge came from different tribes across a wide geographic range. Make it impossible to track back to a single source. That means lying, Joseph points out. Falsifying data. Academic misconduct. Yes, it means choosing between professional integrity and moral obligation, between career and conscience. The grandmother watches me, waiting to see which I'll choose. I think about my career, 12 years of careful work, building reputation, establishing credibility, publication record that opens doors, tenure track position that promises security, all of it built on rigorous methodology, verifiable data, transparent sourcing. Then I think about this being, this person, sitting in a secret garden, maintaining knowledge that could revolutionize ethnobotany, save rare species, provide medical breakthroughs, all while slowly dying with no one to receive her life's work. I'll do it, I say. I'll falsify sources if necessary. I'll claim the knowledge came from multiple informants across multiple tribes. I'll make it impossible to trace back to you. And if I get caught, if my career implodes, that's the price. The grandmother makes a sound. Relief mixed with sadness. Joseph translates. She says you're the first human in many decades willing to sacrifice personal gain to protect her people, even though her people is just her now. She says this gives her hope that maybe eventually, humanity will learn what she tried to teach your ancestors. That knowledge is not ownership, that teaching is not transaction, that some things matter more than personal advancement. But there's more complexity here. Even with anonymized data, I'm still taking her knowledge, translating it into my language, publishing it in my journals, receiving credit, even if obscured, for her life's work. How do we make this reciprocal? I ask. What can I give you in return? The grandmother responds immediately, and Joseph's translation is heavy. She doesn't want anything for herself. She wants protection for this place. Legal protection that survives her death. She wants guarantees that when she's gone, her garden will be maintained. Her rare plants will be propagated. The knowledge she's preserved will continue being preserved. How? This is remote, unmarked. Once you're gone, how would anyone even find it? She wants you to bring others, not now. Later, when she's ready, people she can trust. Indigenous botanists, traditional healers, conservationists who understand respect. She'll teach them what she taught your ancestors. But this time it has to be reciprocal. She teaches, they protect. Knowledge for stewardship, wisdom for sanctuary. It's elegant. A return to the ancient relationship. Her people teach, humans protect the forest. Both benefit, both survive. I'll make it happen, I promise. I'll find the right people. I'll establish protection for this area. I'll create legal frameworks that outlast all of us. The grandmother nods slowly. Then she does something unexpected. She reaches out and takes my hand. Her palm is warm, calloused, gentle. She holds it for a long moment, and I feel something I can only describe as blessing. She's accepting me as student, as partner, as the continuation of a teaching relationship that began thousands of years ago and nearly ended with her. There's one more thing she needs to show you, Joseph says quietly. The reason she agreed to meet you now, despite the risks, something she discovered that changes everything we think we know about human history. The grandmother leads us to the far edge of her garden where a massive cedar tree grows, the largest I've ever seen, easily 20 feet in diameter, probably over 1,000 years old. At its base, hidden by roots and undergrowth, is an opening. She lights a torch, a simple pitch-covered branch that ignites with practiced ease, and gestures for us to follow her inside. The hollow is vast, the ancient tree's heart rotted away by time, creating a natural chamber. But what stops my breath isn't the space itself, it's what fills it. Carvings, hundreds of them covering every surface. Not crude scratches, but sophisticated artwork. Animals, plants, humans, and beings like the grandmother. Scenes of teaching, hunting, gathering, ceremony. A visual narrative carved into cedar wood, preserved by the tree's natural antimicrobial properties. This is her library, Joseph whispers. Her people's history. The grandmother moves along the wall, touching carvings as she vocalizes. Joseph translates, his voice reverent. She says her people were here when the glaciers retreated. They watched the ice melt, watched new forests grow, watched the first humans arrive. Cold, hungry, desperate. The new humans didn't know which animals could be safely hunted, which plants could be eaten, how to survive winter, how to find water. The grandmother points to a specific carving, large beings teaching smaller, more delicate ones how to process salmon, how to identify edible roots, how to build shelter. Her people taught yours, not just plant medicine, everything, fire making, tool crafting, fish preservation, seasonal migration patterns. Her people had lived through multiple ice ages, had survived and adapted and learned. When humans arrived, her people made a choice, help or ignore. They chose help. She moves to another section showing humans and her people working together. The carvings show cooperation, mutual respect, shared knowledge. For thousands of years they coexisted. Humans learned. Her people taught. The relationship was reciprocal. Humans shared their fire, their stories, their innovation. Her people shared their deep time knowledge, their understanding of ecological patterns that span millennia. Both species were enriched. But then the carvings change. The grandmother's vocalization becomes heavier, sadder. Humans multiplied, spread, developed new tools, new methods, stopped needing teachers, started seeing the forest as resource rather than home, started fearing her people rather than learning from them. The relationship broke. The later carvings show her people retreating, hiding, being hunted, families separated, children lost, elders killed, a genocide recorded in cedar wood. Her people tried to maintain the teaching relationship. Joseph translates, tried to remind humans of the old ways. But humans had developed something her people never had, the ability to completely reshape environment to suit themselves. And that ability made humans dangerous, not intentionally, not maliciously, just through sheer transformative force. The grandmother stops at the most recent carvings, crude compared to earlier work, done by fewer hands, recording loss. These are her own carvings, Joseph says, recording the last 100 years, her family dying one by one, her mate killed by loggers who thought he was a bear, her children dying from human diseases, her grandchildren leaving to find territory that no longer exists. She's carved herself alone at the end, the last one, the final witness. But there's one more carving, recent, unfinished. It shows the grandmother teaching a human figure. Between them, plants. Above them, both human and her species, living separately but peacefully. This is her hope, Joseph translates, that before she dies, she can reestablish the teaching relationship, that she can share what she knows with humans who are ready to learn without destroying. That knowledge can bridge the gap evolution created. The grandmother turns to me, and her eyes are full of something beyond sadness, ancient grief mixed with desperate hope. She makes a long vocalization, and Joseph translates carefully. She says humanity is at a threshold. You're destroying the world faster than you can understand what you're losing. Plant species going extinct before you catalog them. Traditional knowledge dying with elders before it's documented. Climate patterns shifting faster than ecosystems can adapt. You're strangling yourselves with progress, and you don't even realize it. The grandmother touches the unfinished carving, but she says humans also have unprecedented capacity for change. You can communicate across the entire world instantly. You can share knowledge globally. You can preserve information in ways her people never could. If You can relearn respect, relearn reciprocity, relearn how to accept teaching without controlling teachers. Then maybe you can save what's left. Maybe you can prevent the worst. She looks at me directly, and I understand the weight she's placing on my shoulders. She's asking if you can be a bridge, if you can translate her knowledge into human systems without destroying her in the process. If you can teach other humans how to learn from the forest without consuming it. If you can help restore the ancient relationship, her people's wisdom combined with human technology, both working toward the same goal, survival. Not just human survival, all survival. The whole interconnected web that you're systematically unraveling. I'm on my knees now, overwhelmed. This being, this ancient, wise, lonely being, is offering humanity one final chance. She's offering her life's knowledge, her people's accumulated wisdom, everything she's preserved through decades of isolation and loss. She's offering it freely, despite everything my species has done to hers. And in return, she's asking for something so simple it breaks my heart. Respect, protection, the willingness to learn without dominating, to receive without exploiting, to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. Yes, I whisper, I'll be your bridge. I'll translate your knowledge into systems humans can understand and use. I'll find others who can learn directly from you. I'll establish protections that outlast both of us. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to restore what we broke. The grandmother places both hands on my head. Blessing, burden, trust. She makes one final sound, and Joseph's translation is barely audible. She says, you carry hope now. It's heavy, but it's also medicine. Don't let it die with you. Dawn is breaking as Joseph and I emerge from the forest. I'm carrying something I can barely comprehend. Knowledge that could revolutionize ethnobotany. Evidence of human hominid cooperation that predates recorded history. And responsibility for protecting the last survivor of an entire people. I don't sleep. I can't. I spend 3 days in my field station, filling notebooks with everything I remember, drawing the plants, documenting the uses, creating maps that deliberately obscure the actual location while maintaining enough geographic accuracy to be scientifically credible. The academic in me is screaming, this is unprecedented. This needs peer review. This needs verification. This needs documentation that meets scientific standards. The human in me knows. Documentation would be murder. On the 4th day, I receive visitors. Not friends. Investigators. 2 men in National Park Service uniforms, a woman from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and, most troublingly, a man in a suit who introduces himself as Special Consultant to the Department of the Interior. Dr. Kovach, the suit says, settling into my tiny field station like he owns it. We've been reviewing your research permits. Your stated purpose was ethnobotanical survey, documenting traditional plant knowledge with local tribes. But we've received reports that you've been accessing restricted areas, making unauthorized expeditions into closed sections of the Hoh rainforest. My blood runs cold. Who reported me? Did someone see us? Are there trail cameras I didn't know about? I've been conducting my approved research. I say carefully. Sometimes that requires accessing remote areas where traditional plant sites are located. At 4 in the morning, the woman from Fish and Wildlife pulls out a tablet, shows me data. Trail cameras picked up your vehicle at the Hoh River trailhead at 3:47 a.m. 4 days ago. You returned at 6:23 a.m. That's a significant hike in darkness, Doctor. Care to explain? Think carefully. I was observing nocturnal pollination patterns. Some plants only release scent attractants at night. To document traditional knowledge about these plants, I need to observe them during active periods. Alone, in restricted territory, without notifying park services? I had a guide, Joseph Stormcloud, traditional healer from the Hoh tribe. It's all within my approved research protocol. The suit leans forward. Dr. Kovach, we're going to be direct. There have been unusual reports from this area, large animal sightings, vocalizations that don't match known species, infrared signatures from trail cameras that suggest something significant is living in the deep forest. Oh God, they know. Not everything, but enough to be investigating. The Pacific Northwest has black bears, elk, possibly some unidentified cougar populations, I say, keeping my voice steady. Large mammals creating unusual thermal signatures isn't exactly unprecedented. We're aware, but these signatures are different. Bipedal movement patterns, intelligence suggesting tool use. The department has classified this as a potential species of concern. Species of concern is bureaucratic language for, we want to capture and study this. I haven't seen anything like what you're describing. I lie. If there were an unknown primate species in this area, my research would have encountered evidence. The suit pulls out photos, trail camera captures, blurry and distant, but showing a large bipedal figure, not definitive, but suggestive, enough to justify further investigation. These images were captured within 2 miles of where you were hiking 4 days ago. You're telling me you saw nothing? Correct. I saw nothing like that. Could be a person in a suit. Could be a bear standing upright. Could be camera malfunction creating false positives. Without clear evidence, speculation is irresponsible. The National Park Service rangers exchange glances. The woman from Fish and Wildlife looks skeptical. Dr. Kovach, the suit says quietly, if there is an unknown species in this forest, discovery could be the scientific achievement of the century. Your career would be made. Why would you deny involvement? Because some achievements are actually atrocities. Because I'm a scientist, I say firmly. I deal in evidence, not speculation. Blurry photos and thermal anomalies don't constitute proof of an unknown species. They constitute data points requiring further investigation. If and when that investigation produces credible evidence, I'll be first in line to study it. Until then, I'm focused on my approved research. The suit studies me for a long moment. You're lying. That's quite an accusation. Not an accusation, an observation. You're protecting something. The question is what and why. Before I can respond, Joseph appears in my doorway. He's carrying his ceremonial staff, wearing traditional regalia. His presence transforms the dynamic instantly. This is now a matter involving tribal sovereignty, treaty rights, sacred knowledge. Gentlemen, ma'am, Joseph says with formal courtesy. I'm the guide Dr. Kovach mentioned. I should clarify. The areas she's been accessing are within traditional Ho territory, sites protected by treaty agreements. Her research has been conducted with full tribal approval and supervision. The suit frowns. Treaty rights don't supersede federal investigation of potentially endangered species. They do, Joseph says calmly, when those investigations would violate sacred sites. The areas in question contain ceremonial grounds, ancestral burial locations, sites of spiritual significance that predate federal jurisdiction. Dr. Kovach has been documenting plant knowledge associated with these sacred spaces. Your trail cameras are, technically, violating treaty agreements by monitoring restricted ceremonial areas. It's a clever play, reframing the investigation as potential federal overreach on sovereign tribal land. The suit knows it, and his expression hardens. Mr. Stormcloud, with respect, if there's an unknown species on tribal land, Federal Endangered Species Act protocols take precedence, only if such a species is confirmed to exist. Joseph interrupts gently, which, as Dr. Kovach correctly noted, requires actual evidence. Speculation based on ambiguous trail camera data doesn't constitute confirmation. Until you have definitive proof, you're conducting surveillance on sacred tribal territory without proper consultation. I believe that violates several treaty agreements, not to mention NAGPRA provisions. The room falls silent. Joseph has essentially threatened legal action if they proceed without proper tribal consultation, a process that could take months or years and would require proving their evidence justifies potential treaty violations. The suit stands slowly. This conversation isn't over. We'll be conducting further investigation. If we find evidence of obstruction, you won't, I say firmly, because there's nothing to obstruct. If an unknown species exists in this forest, good luck finding it. The Olympic Peninsula is over 1 million acres of some of the most remote wilderness in the continental United States. Even with technology, even with unlimited resources, finding something that doesn't want to be found is nearly impossible. Nearly, the suit emphasizes. Not completely. They leave, but the threat hangs in the air like smoke. Joseph and I sit in silence after they leave. Finally, he speaks. They'll be back. With more resources, better technology. They've seen enough to justify expanded investigation. How long do we have? Weeks. Maybe a month if we're lucky. They'll need tribal consultation before deploying in the deep forest, but they can monitor from outside, set up more cameras, maybe use drone surveillance. We need to warn her. She already knows. She heard everything. She was near enough to listen. She's preparing to leave. The grief hits me like physical pain. No, there has to be another way. If she leaves all that knowledge, that garden will remain and be protected. She's been planning this, Sarah. She's known for years that eventually humans would narrow the search area too much. She's been preparing. Preparing how? Come. She wants to show you. We return to the forest at dusk, moving quickly now. The grandmother is waiting at her garden, but everything has changed. She's harvesting, carefully, systematically taking seeds, cuttings, root samples. Her basket is filled with plant material, each species wrapped in cedar bark, labeled with markings I don't understand. She makes a vocalization, and Joseph translates. She's taking samples to replant elsewhere, someplace deeper, more remote. She's been scouting territory for years, locations that will remain wild even as humans expand. British Columbia, Alaska, remote valleys in the Rockies. She'll relocate, establish new gardens, continue the preservation work. Alone, I whisper. She'll do all this alone. The grandmother responds, and there's something like humor in her vocalization. She says she's been alone for decades. She's accustomed to it. And besides, Joseph smiles slightly. She's not entirely alone anymore. She has you. The grandmother approaches me, places something in my hands. Seeds. Dozens of species. Carefully preserved, each one labeled with carvings I'm beginning to recognize. A library of rare plants. Genetic diversity preserved across countless samples. Joseph translates her instructions. She wants you to establish a seed bank, work with botanical gardens, conservation organizations, indigenous groups. Plant these in protected locations. Don't explain where they came from. Just present them as recovered from traditional tribal sources. Use your scientific credentials to ensure they're preserved, studied, propagated. This is trust, I say, overwhelmed. This is everything. Yes, Joseph confirms. She's giving you her life's work, the species she's saved, the genetic diversity she's maintained, because she understands that one individual, no matter how dedicated, can't preserve everything. But networks can. Systems can. If you can integrate this knowledge into human preservation efforts without revealing the source, these plants survive. The grandmother makes another vocalization. Longer, more complex. She says she's also giving you something else, her testimony. The carvings in the cedar tree, she wants you to document them. Not with cameras, not with scanners. With drawings. She'll teach you the symbols, the meanings. You'll create a record that can be shared without revealing the original location. That could take weeks. You have 3 days. She's leaving on the 4th day, whether the documentation is complete or not. The investigators will move faster than we'd like. She needs to be gone before they deploy serious resources. For 3 days I barely sleep. The grandmother teaches me her people's symbol system, a complex visual language that records ecological knowledge, seasonal patterns, plant properties, preparation methods. Each carving is a compressed data structure containing layers of information that would take pages to write in English. I fill sketchbooks with copies, learning as I draw. The grandmother corrects me patiently when I misunderstand, demonstrates meanings through gesture and example. Joseph translates when language is necessary, but increasingly, I'm learning to understand her directly, not through words, but through shared focus on the work. It's teaching, pure, concentrated knowledge transfer across the vast gulf of species. And despite everything, the danger, the urgency, the grief of impending separation, it's beautiful. On the 3rd night, the grandmother shows me the final carvings, her legacy message, instructions for any of her people who might survive elsewhere, telling them about the garden locations, the seed caches, the human allies who can be trusted, and one carving specifically for humans, a figure teaching a smaller figure with symbols radiating outward representing knowledge flowing into the world. The message is clear. What I've learned must be shared. Carefully, respectfully, anonymously, but shared. Knowledge hidden helps no one. She says your species has a gift hers never developed. Joseph translates the grandmother's final teaching. You can transmit knowledge across vast distances, preserve it across generations, share it globally almost instantly. Her people's knowledge lived in individual minds, passed through direct teaching. When her people died, their knowledge died with them. The grandmother touches my head gently. But you can take what she's taught you and spread it across your entire species. The plant medicine, the ecological wisdom, the understanding of how to live in balance with the world. It can become part of human knowledge, integrated into your science, your medicine, your conservation efforts. Not as her knowledge or her people's knowledge, but as humanity's relearned wisdom. That's theft, I protest. Taking credit for what your people preserved. The grandmother makes a sharp sound, disagreement mixed with urgency. Joseph translates firmly. She says knowledge belongs to no one. It belongs to the world. Her people preserved it, yes, but they preserved it for everyone, for all beings, all species, the entire interconnected web of life. If you share it and don't credit her, that's not theft. That's what she wants. Because if you credit her, humans will hunt for her, will try to capture, study, exploit. But if the knowledge simply appears, integrated into human systems with no clear source, it's just knowledge. Useful, available, free to help whoever needs it. She's giving everything and asking for nothing, not even recognition. On the fourth morning at dawn, the grandmother stands ready to leave. Her baskets are packed, her garden cleared of the most precious specimens, her cedar library documented. She makes one final gesture, places her hand over her heart, then extends it toward me. A blessing, a goodbye, a transmission of hope across the unbridgeable distance of species. Then she walks into the forest and disappears. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my university office, no longer field research, now administration and consultation. I've published 3 papers on traditional ecological knowledge from Pacific Northwest indigenous sources, each one introducing plant species and medicinal applications that are revolutionizing ethnobotany. The papers are deliberately vague about sources. Multiple informants across several tribes over a 10-year research period. No names, no specific locations, no way to trace back. The botanical gardens at University of Washington now house 12 previously extinct plant species that mysteriously appeared in their collection, with notes saying, recovered from tribal seed preservation projects. Genetic analysis confirms their genuine ancient lineages. No one questions too deeply, everyone's just excited to have them. I've established a network of indigenous botanists, conservation biologists, and traditional healers, what we informally call the Forest Teachers Project. We don't advertise, don't seek publicity. We quietly work to preserve rare species, document traditional knowledge with proper cultural protocols, and establish protected areas that serve both ecological and cultural preservation. Joseph is part of this network. So are 3 other tribal elders I've connected with, each one carrying pieces of the teaching relationship between humans and the forest people. We meet quarterly, share knowledge, coordinate protection efforts. We never mention the grandmother directly, but we all know. We're continuing what she started, maintaining the bridge she risked everything to rebuild. The Department of the Interior investigation concluded 6 months ago. Insufficient evidence to confirm the existence of an unknown primate species in Olympic National Forest. Thermal signatures and visual sightings likely misidentified bears or human activity. Case closed pending new evidence. They found nothing. The grandmother was gone before they deployed their drone surveillance and expanded camera network. Her garden appears to be natural forest. She camouflaged it before leaving, making it invisible to anyone who doesn't know exactly where to look. Joseph and I return sometimes, maintaining it quietly. The plants she left behind continue growing, producing seeds we distribute through our network. The cedar tree with her carved library remains, protected by its remote location and our collective silence. Last month, I received an email from a conservation researcher in British Columbia. She'd found an unusual pattern of rare plants growing in remote valleys, almost like someone had deliberately cultivated a botanical garden in the wilderness. She wanted to know if I'd encountered similar patterns in my Pacific Northwest research. I smiled and replied, "The forest works in mysterious ways. Sometimes we find what was always there, just waiting to be recognized." Joseph tells me there have been reports, unconfirmed, ambiguous, of large bipedal tracks in remote sections of the British Columbia interior. Thermal signatures that don't quite match known species. Vocalizations recorded by wildlife cameras that defy classification. Nothing definitive. Nothing that would trigger investigation. Just hints, whispers, suggestions that someone continues the work of preservation in places humans rarely go. I hope it's her. I hope she found territory wild enough to be safe. Resources sufficient to continue her gardens, maybe. Impossibly, hopefully, others of her kind who survived in places we haven't looked. But even if she's alone, even if she's the last, her knowledge survived. It's integrated into human systems now, being used to heal, to preserve, to understand. The teaching relationship she worked to restore is functioning again, even if the teachers have to remain invisible. Emma comes to visit sometimes. She's 11 now, doing well in school, managing her seizures with medication and awareness. She knows I work with her grandfather on plant projects. She doesn't know the whole story, doesn't need to yet. But last week she showed me a new drawing. It showed a large figure and a small figure, but this time there were two small figures. A family, growing. I had a dream, she said quietly. My kind friend wasn't alone anymore. She had a baby, or maybe found another friend. She looked happy. I couldn't speak, just held the drawing, hoping it was more than a child's wishful thinking. Dr. Sarah, Emma asked, do you think some friendships continue even when people are far apart? Even when they can't see each other? Yes, I managed. I think the most important friendships transcend distance. They exist in memory, in gratitude, in the changes they create in who we become. She smiled. Good, because I still think about her. I hope she thinks about me too. I'm certain she does, I said truthfully. I think about the grandmother constantly, about her loneliness, her resilience, her impossible hope that humanity might still learn what she tried to teach our ancestors, that knowledge is relationship, that preservation requires respect, that some things matter more than personal advancement. She trusted me with everything and asked for nothing except that I honor the knowledge by sharing it freely. I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. The plant medicine is helping people. The rare species are being propagated. The conservation areas are protecting habitat. The teaching relationship, ancient, fundamental, nearly broken, is functioning again. Not perfectly, not completely, but functioning. Some colleagues ask why I changed career paths, why I moved from field research to coordination and administration. I tell them I realized my skills were better used creating systems that support other researchers, rather than conducting primary research myself. It's true, in its way. The deeper truth is that I encountered something that taught me what science is for. Not discovery that exploits, not knowledge that destroys, but understanding that preserves. I learned that the highest form of scientific achievement might be facilitating others' work, rather than claiming your own glory. I learned this from someone who gave away centuries of accumulated knowledge to a species that nearly destroyed hers, asking nothing in return, except that we do better this time.